Squid Game actually is really, really good. It's nothing like the things that are normally popular. It's so emotional and brutal and just biting, and it just hits so hard. It's so deep, and honestly, I'm proud of them for making the show as big of a success as they have. But I'm not making this video to just pile on aimless praise to the massive pile that already exists for Squid Game. The reason that I'm making this video is it's to leech off the success of the Squid Game show and hopefully get some views, but also to clue you in to the fact that maybe Squid Game is actually deeper than you think. But before getting into what I think the main message of this show is, I want to first highlight a few little touches within the show that I appreciated. There's a lot of stuff I like about this show, and I just don't know how to fit it in anywhere else, so I'm just gonna start listing things off. I like that the woman from North Korea has a scar on her neck, as if someone tried to cut her throat in the past. You know, it's good foreshadowing because someone eventually succeeds. I like how Ali is missing fingers. We can assume the machinery that he's been working around did this to him. What I love is that he ends up causing something similar to happen to his abusive boss. I like the gambling sound effects that play when the piggy bank fills up with money above the contestants. Gambling is a major theme in the show, and it's a nice touch. I like that the little hair clip on the red light, green light girl is a combination of all of the shapes that form the logo of the game. I like that the masks the game staff wear look vaguely like the game pieces in the first episode. I like that the lighter that looks like a gun comes in a box that's similar looking to the coffins at the Squid Game. A gun that makes fire, the coffins are about to be burned. But now on to the main meaning of Squid Game. Everyone is saying Squid Game is a critique of capitalism, that the Battle Royale deathmatch forming the foundation of the show is a metaphor for capitalism. While I agree with this, I think the show isn't as black and white on the topic as some make it out to be. It approaches this topic with a bit more nuance, and plus, it's about a lot more than just capitalism. Many conservatives don't like this show because they think it's anti-capitalism and therefore somehow pro-communism. This is not true. The show may criticize aspects of capitalism, but that doesn't mean it's pro-commie or whatever. For instance, a major character in the show, she escapes from North Korea and tries to survive in South Korea. When she escaped, she thought she was entering a paradise, but it turns out that the capitalist system in the South is actually pretty difficult. It's pretty dog-eat-dog. With the amount of hardship and struggle she finds in the South, she wonders if it was even worth the journey to begin with. But she doesn't actually think this. You know, this isn't the show saying that the North Korean, Chinese-funded communist system is better. It's nothing like that. In fact, one of the only things we hear about this character's backstory in North Korea is that a plague wiped out half of her family and that the bodies piled up so much they had to burn them into streets. This show is not pro-communism, Mr. Shapiro. This show does not say that North Korea actually isn't that bad. It's simply showing that there's still a lot of suffering and inequality that exists in capitalism. Everyone is constantly complaining about how little money they have, how much debt they're in. The old woman can't afford her medication. People are so desperate for money, they're basically forced into competing in death matches. And yes, these isolated dog-eat-dog death matches are an allegory for the dog-eat-dog world that exists outside. But I don't think these Squid Games are metaphorical of just capitalism. I think they represent Western civilization in general. It's kind of about game theory, how children learn games and they're brought up to compete in society. The contestants in the Squid Game sleep in bunk beds. They wait in line for food that is prepared for them just like how they would at a school. The games that they play during the competition are children's games, and they take place in childlike environments. Children have their photo taken for IDs, much like how kids have to, have their picture taken when they get their license, and then they're on the grid, and pretty soon they'll be able to vote. It's allegorical to children being brought up and then thrusted out into this, dog-eat-dog world. There are hierarchical structures within the game, chains of commands that are shown by arbitrary shapes on the authorities' uniform. The foundation of this game, the system, is all based on gambling. The Squid Game is an allegory for a modern, capitalist, westernized civilization. And the VIPs that watch the Squid Games are a representation of us. the viewers.
No fucking way.
They are me, entertained by the sadistic violence of South Koreans butchering each other on the screen. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I love South Korean cinema, and I think I like it for more than just the brutal violence, but still, even I have to admit that the meaning behind the VIPs in the Squid Game is not lost on me. But let's get back to what I think the Squid Game is most about. East versus West, or I guess maybe saying something like native culture versus Western culture would work better. The borders that divide ideological lines is a major theme in this story. I think to support this, the show inserts a bunch of imagery of borders. And then, story-wise, there's obviously the border between the North and the South, and a major character, Ali, is from Pakistan. This fits with the theme because, Britain, the West, was in control of India way back when, but when it planned to give India back to its people, they realized that the region was kind of ideologically divided between Hindus and Muslims, with each side wanting their own country. So, with hardly no research at all, the British just carved out an arbitrary border and chaos ensued. And it's kind of like the North and South Korea situation, with massive civilizations sort of puppeting the ones underneath that they take over. But speaking of borderlines that divide ideologically, let's talk about our main character. I'm just going to call him 456 because I can't pronounce his or anyone else's name in this story. Because, again, I am the VIPs. They refer to these characters as numbers, not people, because the contestants of the VIPs are merely horses in a race, characters in a story, not human beings. So, yeah, I'm going to call the main character 456, and the irony is not at all lost on me. So, if the Squid Game represents the American system, 456 represents the opposite. Generally speaking, 456 and the contestants trapped in the game represents South Korea, the native culture, and the game itself represents the American influence that's taking over and replacing this Korean culture. When the man who invites 456 to play the Squid Game first approaches, 456 assumes he's some sort of Christian salesman trying to spread the Western faith.
예수 안 믿어요. 우리 집 불교 믿으니까 귀찮게 하지 말고 저리 가라고.
Later in the show, 456 learns that his daughter will be moving to America because her new, financially successful stepfather has been given a job there.
지금이랑 새 남편이랑 내년에 다 미국으로 간다 하더라. 미국으로 그냥 들어가 보면 한국말 다 까먹고 니랑 말도 영영 안 통할 끼고.
For his daughter's birthday, he feeds her cheap Korean food, but she hardly eats it because her stepfather has already taken her out to a nice steak restaurant. I can't help but think of America when I think of steak, which is probably why it was also fed to the finalists in the game towards the end of the show, on top of all the murder imagery that goes along with the dish, the big bloody piece of meat, the knives, you get it. But I think the best way that this show gets across these ideas of ideologies and cultures sort of, interacting with each other, the borders between them and such, I think how the show gets this across is with its use of color. Different colors highlight this divide between the game and those who are forced to play it. Look at the game pieces here in the first episode. The man is red and 456 is blue, much like how the colors are used in the real game. The contestants are blue, and the people that run the game dress in red. In the beginning of the show, 456 wears a blue hat, but by the end, when he finally sells out and starts to spend his money and embrace the system that awarded it to him, he dyes his hair red. There are red crosses in the skyline in the background and many more examples. But then I also think the color gold is important. I believe gold represents the highest structures of this encroaching American system. Gold it's gold. It's money, paradise, heaven. The note in the final episode is gold. The debit card is gold. The suitcase filled with money is gold. Look at the VIPs. Look at the lighting on the front man's living quarters. Look at the animatronic little jazz club. Jazz being something that's as American as steak. But again, it's also surrounded in gold. Look at the lighting in 456's daughter's home. Remember, this household is financially successful and about to move to America. Look at the color of their clothes in their family photo. Look at the lighting of the old man on his deathbed, which reminds me of another thing this show excels at: religious imagery. The old man here, formerly known as or pretending to be player number 1, the guy who came first, is kind of like God. God made people as a way to experience his own creation, kind of like how 001 played his own game. Player 1 lives on the top of a building, looking down on all of the mortals, like God in heaven. His room is on the 7th floor of this building. 7 is known as God's number. along with the fact that it rhymes with heaven. But I think my favorite clue for this man being God is right after the tug-of-war scene. The religious man is praying, thanking God for the fact that they just survived another game. But an anti-religious woman interrupts him.
지금 누구한테 비는 거야? 주님? 당신이 지금 살아있는 게 주님 덕분인 것 같아? 당신이 지금 살아서 혀를 놀리고 있는 건 저 할아버지랑
The way this scene handles thanking God, as well as thanking this old man, it just makes me think that it's trying to tell us something a little more. Player 456, I think, is kind of like Jesus. Clues to this are everywhere. He's stabbed through the hand as if it were a nail for a cross. He wanders for many days, growing his hair and beard. He believes that people are inherently good. On the night of Christmas Eve, right as it becomes Christmas Day, these two characters debate about human nature. 456 believes people are good, while the old man knows that they are not. God sees people as flawed and irredeemable. Jesus thinks they can be saved. This clues us into a pretty important question that I think this show is asking. Did the system make people into beasts? Or did it just exploit the fact that people have always been beasts? This question is what I think Squid Game is really exploring. It may seem like this show is saying that capitalism is what corrupts humans, but this line here makes me think differently. This guy is saying that he wishes we could return to a time when humanity was pure and innocent in the Garden of Eden, before sin, before greed and industry and war and all of that. But the thing is, this religious character isn't really seen to be the smartest. The audience isn't really supposed to listen to this guy's words as if they're gospel. Him saying this line, him thinking that humanity was once innocent, kind of makes me think that the show is saying that humanity never was innocent. While the show is certainly critical of capitalism, I think it hits on things that are a bit deeper. When I watch the show, I start asking questions like, maybe human nature isn't really all that pretty. Maybe people have always been and probably always will be competitive, greedy, selfish, and violent. Maybe the Squid Game, much like the capitalist system it represents, just found an outlet for these inherent features. Maybe the cruel system isn't what turns us into these cruel beasts. Maybe it's our beastliness that gives rise to such a cruel system. Or maybe I just need to shut up and end the video so you can make up your own minds.
This game is over.
Yep, that about wraps it up.